Voters in South Korea have elected a new president. That's after the dismissal of former leader Park Geun-Hye on charges of massive corruption. A record number turned out to cast their ballots in what's been a highly charged election. Exit polls show Jae-in of the Democratic Party on track to win by a margin of at least 20%. He ran on a platform of economic recovery and better relations with North Korea. He beat software tycoon Ahn Cheol-soo, who also called for better relations with Pyongyang, and Hong Joon-pyo of the Liberty Party. That's the party of former President Park Geun-hye, whose impeachment triggered the election. She's now likely to be tried on charges of accepting kickbacks from top corporations, including Samsung. Many young voters blame her policies for increasing unemployment. Critics also say her hardline stance on North Korea has fueled the erratic behavior of its supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, leading the country down the path towards nuclear confrontation. Well, joining me now from Seoul is Si-woong-koo. He's the co-founder and publisher of news magazine Korea Expose, and Emmanuel Passreich. He's a professor at Kyung-hee University and the director of the Asia Institute in Seoul. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Si-woong-koo, so it looks like President Moon, was this expected?
Yeah, I think all the polls leading up to the election day, which was today, showed that Moon would be winning by a wide margin. There was some uncertainty imposed by the early voting, which took place last week, and we are still not entirely sure to what extent those votes have been reflected in the exit polls we're seeing here in South Korea. That said, I don't think there's any doubt as to who is the real winner of this election, and it is the Liberals, and it is Mr. Moon.
Emmanuel, what was Moon's winning strategy, the magic formula?
Oh, I'm not so sure that he had a winning strategy. I think maybe his opponents, particularly Ahn Cheol-soo, had a losing strategy. I think Ahn Cheol-soo would have been the person who might have given him a run for the money. But he decided at the last moment to sort of cater to certain conservative forces by making somewhat more hawkish statements about North Korea, promising a 3% military budget and other things, which had essentially backfired on him.
Si-woong-koo, help me understand the background to this election, given that President Park Geun-hye was the first democratically elected president to be kicked out. What was the mood of the people, given that that had just happened, and then they had to go into an election? Help me understand that.
Okay, so as many people around the world already knows, South Korea has gone through a rather extraordinary political moment. We have had the sitting president ensnared in a corruption scandal, and she was impeached by the legislature, and she was eventually removed from power by the Constitutional Court. Many people have been angry at the revelations. They were angry at her. They were angry at the conservatives. So this was a right moment for the progressives to really rise and take charge for the first time in 9 years. I think the general mood in South Korea in the lead up to this election can be described really as one of excitement. People are fed up with 9 years of conservative rule, and they wanted a change, and it seems like that's what they're getting after today's vote.
And Emmanuel, instead of it being just one corrupt president, did voters see it as one corrupt system or one corrupt conservative party?
Well, there is corruption, systemic corruption as well, and Moon Jae-in is not totally beyond or above that himself. So I'm a little bit less optimistic in terms of what the ultimate consequences. I mean, many of the liberal progressives are very concerned that Moon Jae-in has a tendency to appoint or seek advice from a very wide range of people, including many who his voters certainly didn't anticipate, and to be somewhat indecisive, although his reputation is as a person to be a very kind and considerate person. I've never met him myself.
Emmanuel, when people hear liberal and conservative, they would think, okay,
Yes.
if they, especially, in terms of a Western audience that's not too familiar with South Korea, they would think, okay, liberal would be closer to, say, the Democratic Party in the United States, conservative will be closer to the Republican Party. Is that how it translates in a place like South Korea?
I think not at all. I think even Park Geun-Hye, if you'd put her in the American Congress, would have been a liberal Democrat on most topics. On the issue of North Korea, however, you get very distinct differences. In the case of Yoon Sung-min, somewhat incomprehensible, the rather hostile position he's taken.
Yeah, Sewon-koo, let's talk North Korea for a second. It seems as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems as if the South Koreans at this moment in time are far less hawkish than the United States are on North Korea. And I'm not talking about the government, I'm talking about the people. Maybe it's because they live in the region and, you know, they might be the immediate victims of any trouble. Is that the case? And if it is the case, why?
Well, I think the word I would use may be that people here are far less concerned with North Korea than the international media is, or people outside South Korea. Every time I do one of these interviews with foreign media, I'm getting asked, how are the South Koreans responding to the North Korean threat? And I can certainly tell you that while there has been debates regarding what needs to be done about North Korea, this did not prove to be one of the most important issues in this election. And you can tell that from the surveys that were conducted today alongside the exit polls. People are asked, what do they really care about? What do they want to see happening in South Korea with the new president? And they are quite united in saying that they are concerned about inequality here. They're worried about lack of job prospects for young people. They also want to do away with corruption that characterized President Park Geun-hye's administration. And they also want to see things done with regard to the environment and also curtailing state power. Reforming the national security apparatus apparently is also a key concern for voters. So North Korea is really not something that we, or South Koreans rather, have been thinking so much about in the run-up to this election.
Okay, and fair enough. And forgive me, because I don't want to let it go just for the moment, but let me ask you one more question, Sewon-koo, about it. And the fact that, you know, Donald Trump has been more hawkish. He's spoken about North Korea in terms of kind of apocalyptic, in many apocalyptic terms in many ways. How have South Korean people responded to that? Just the American behavior over the past few months.
Well, there's concern. I don't think most people certainly in South Korea want war. And as the weeks dragged on in the lead up to this election, there have been instances where it seems as though America was embarking on a new stage in its policy toward North Korea, although in reality it didn't really amount to anything. So people were concerned about it. And then there were other statements that are more have tangible consequences. For example, when Donald Trump said that South Korea needs to pay for THAAD, that was something that ended up being a very important topic in the last televised presidential debate, with the different candidates taking slightly different positions on the matter. So those things have practical consequences for South Korea. People do talk about it, they think about it, but with regard to the North Korean threat in general, it has not been such an important issue.
Emmanuel, do you agree with that? That there's been a far greater emphasis on domestic issues?
I think that's 100% accurate, yes. And I think that Donald Trump's statements have been so inconsistent on the American side, going from total war to we want you to pay $1 billion for THAAD, to we want to renegotiate the FTA agreement, which seemed to imply to some people that somehow these were equivalent, that somehow if you negotiated a better FTA agreement, maybe he would go lighter on North Korea or vice versa. So a sort of a blurring of this distinction between economic issues and security issues, which was rather distasteful for many people, including conservatives.
Emmanuel, and security inextricably linked to foreign policy in general. Is there any way we can foresee what Moon's foreign policy will be like?
Well, I think regarding North Korea, there's no doubt in anybody's mind. He has, in many cases, he had the opportunity to back down or soften his position on engagement with North Korea, and I think he pointedly did not do so. And he's going to have a very complicated relationship with Washington, D.C. But I think it may not be quite as painful as some people anticipate, because the Donald Trump administration is so totally lacking in legitimacy and unable to articulate any vision for East Asia, that it's sort of a blank slate. So it's possible, I don't know if Moon Jae-in has the skill, but it is possible for Korea, in fact, as the only, relatively democratic country, for him to be the adult in the room and to set an agenda for integration and peaceful coexistence. I'm just not sure that a professional politician of Moon Jae-in's character and personality would be able to rise to that occasion.
Mm-hmm. Se-Woon-koo, in terms of a laundry list, in order to convince the South Korean people that this president means business and this president should be trusted, how long will the people give Moon Jae-in? And what's on that laundry list in terms of domestic and foreign policy in the next few months? What needs to be ticked off?
Well, I mean, things are moving so fast here, and I don't know how much patience people have to wait for change. Just to give you an example, normally when a new president is elected, there is a transition period of about 2 months. In this case, we have a special election, and as soon as the National Electoral Commission announces the official result of the election, we have a president. Right. And how will this president really govern without having a cabinet, without having a majority in the National Assembly? That's a question we will maybe have to discuss another time.
And the expectation to get to work yesterday. Yeah, sorry for interrupting. Please continue and finish your point.
No problem. As to what he needs to do, well, I mean, at least his hardcore supporters believe there are several things he needs to do. One is he needs to perhaps at least discuss with America what to do about THAAD, the U.S.-made missile defense system that was deployed rather in a surprise mode while everybody else was consumed by the presidential scandal and the election campaign. He recognizes that this is something that will be very difficult to reverse, but at least when it comes to cost issues or other details, he will want to discuss that. He has also shown an intention to reopen the discussion over the issue of comfort women with Japan, which is not going to be a very pleasant one, because Japanese government adamantly believes that this is something that has been closed, especially in an agreement with the previous administration under Park Geun-Hye. When it comes to domestic issues, of course, corruption is on the agenda. Reforming the national economy dominated by the chaebols or the big conglomerates like Samsung, that's something that he also needs to do because he has made the pledge. So that's just a few examples of the things that he's supposed to tackle, and let's see how fast he can get to working on those issues.
Yeah, he's got a major job on his hands. It's an angry yet vibrant time in South Korean politics. Fascinating to observe from the outside. Thanks so much, both of you, Se-Woon-koo and Emmanuel Pastreich, for giving me deeper insights into the culture and the politics of the country. Thanks again. Hope to have you on the program again sometime soon.